Hi there, and good afternoon. My name is Angela Hoffman, pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm the Director of Professional Development with ACPA. I'm really excited to have you here with us today for celebrating Careers in Student Affairs Month. And we have four panelists here representing different pathways to and through and in student affairs and higher education. And so we're really excited to chat with them today about their pathways and how you can create your path in student affairs and higher education. For those of you that are joining us virtually, you're welcome to chat in, let us know that you're here, let us know if you have questions as we go about our time together today. We're going to start our time today with a land acknowledgement. ACPA, College Student Educators International, is the leading comprehensive student affairs association that advances higher education and engages students for a lifetime of learning and discovery. Although serving an international audience, our membership is primarily from the United States, and our offices are headquartered in Washington, D.C. at the National Center for Higher Education. Related to our mission of supporting and fostering learning through the generation and sharing of knowledge, ACPA acknowledges the painful history of genocide in the United States for Native, Aboriginal, and Indigenous peoples. We honor and respect the many and diverse tribal nations and people who were forcefully removed from, as well as those still connected to this land. We particularly acknowledge and recognize that the land upon which our international headquarters is located today has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among a number of Indigenous people, including the Piscataway, the Anacostank, the Mattapanit, Nangummak, Pahumunki, Powhihant, Nanticoke, Ticominkni, Manungkon, Matanponi, Nansimon, Rapahonik, Anistohimi, Onami, Austik. And those are the original tribal nations of the Washington, D.C. region and the original occupants. ACPA strongly advocates for higher education and student affairs professionals to honor the land, the original tribal occupants, and the history of the place where you're located and joining us virtually today, as well as the locations of our panelists joining us. Further, we have a responsibility to continually self-educate, reflect, and listen to the history and peoples in our area, including tribal land acknowledgements in practice, and their histories, and understanding and acknowledging history is not only respectful and educational, it's also a justice-oriented advocacy that's necessary for continuing the work of dismantling the devastating effects of settler colonialism in our society. And I want to acknowledge too and connect our land acknowledgement to the conversation that we're having today. And so as we're talking about pathways to and through student affairs and higher education, that there's colonial implications for the reproduction in higher education and the ways in which we navigate careers and pathways. And so we'll be holding that as we move forward with our conversation today as well. And again, I'm really excited to have our four panelists here with us, joining us from their various pathways, and I'm going to invite them each to share their name, pronouns, campus role, their institution, and a little bit about their pathway in higher education. So to kick us off, Heather, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for including me today, and it's good to see all of you and my colleagues on this call. Angela has said, my name is Heather Shea. She, her, hers are my pronouns. I am currently serving as the Director of Women's Student Services at Michigan State University, a job I just started in July. And I have been working full-time in higher education or student affairs since 2000, so I'm almost at that 20-year point. And I'm currently serving as the co-lead of the Next Gen Institute in ACPA, but I've been involved in a variety of different roles, including serving on the convention planning team, serving on the governing board, serving as a chair of a commission, and also just a member of ACPA since, I think, 1998. So thanks for having me today.
Thanks, Heather. Joe, do you want to share next?
Certainly. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from, everyone. My name is Joe Cooper, he, him, his. I am at Michigan Technological University. I am the Director of Student Financial Services, which is financial aid. I'm also currently serving for a few months as an interim Senior Director of Residence Education and Housing Services. I've been working in student affairs, higher education for over 13 years, full-time professionally now. The time has gone by very fast. I'm also involved in ACPA and have been involved in a variety of capacities. I consider it my professional home. I started out in a commission for campus safety and emergency preparedness, and currently I'm serving on the
Uh-oh, we've lost Joe.
Thank you. I think I froze there for a second. Ed, do you want to share with us next?
Sure. Wait, did we lose Joe? I just want to make sure I don't know if we did or not. Well, I hope Joe gets back. Yes. Good day, everyone. My name is Ed Cabellon, he, him, his, and I am the Vice President for Student Services and Enrollment Management at Bristol Community College in Massachusetts. I've been working professionally in higher education since 1997, and so I think I'm approaching 22, 23 years in the field of higher education. And certainly with ACPA, I've been involved over the years on convention planning teams. I served on a special task force for digital technology a few years back, and also was awarded Diamond Honoree at one point along with Heather. So I'm gonna make sure Heather gets that as well. So certainly great to be with you all today, to see my colleagues and to have the opportunity. I'm grateful for it. So thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Cecilia, do you want to share with us next?
Yes, so thank you so much for sharing your afternoon and for having me today. My name is Ceceilia Parnther. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am an assistant professor and program coordinator for higher education at St. John's University in Queens, New York. In terms of student affairs, I have just about 12 years of full-time experience in the field. I started in, res life, did some student conduct work, also some advising. I'm currently still what I consider dabbling in student affairs, although my primary work is in higher ed. I serve as a faculty in residence at St. John's, and it's one of the most fulfilling parts of my work. Let's make sure that I have all of the questions answered. So I've been involved with ACPA in various capacities for about 15 years at this point. I'm currently the vice chair for special projects for the Commission for Academic Affairs.
Great. And for our first question, to kick us off with learning a little bit more about your pathway to and through student affairs and higher education, I'm always fascinated by folks' stories and what led them to kind of where they are today. So how did you decide about going into student affairs? Cecilia, do you want to take
first? Or Cecilia, you start, yeah.
Okay, sure. So I feel like student affairs kind of chose me rather than the other way around. So in undergrad, I was very involved and engaged. I was resident assistant. And after college, I taught for a while, and the program that I was in, the funding was cut. And so I was left with this: do I go back on that market? My heart wasn't fully committed to that sort of search. And so I looked at some different graduate programs, and I spoke with a mentor. In the meantime, I took a job as a hall director for a small school. And in talking to mentors, I found out, wait, you might want to go to graduate school and learn some theory to align with those things that you're doing there. So I thought that might be a good idea. And after a few years, I went back and did that, and I've been in student affairs ever since. I considered another pathway in that I thought that I would be either teaching theater and English, working in journalism, and neither of those things are happening. But I'm very happy to be where I am.
Some of those unexpected twists and turns.
Yes.
Heather, I think you had a few twists and turns you were telling me about earlier.
Yeah, so I was also an RA. I don't know how many of us have that as our origin story in the field, but I feel like all paths lead from housing potentially. Um, so I was serving as an RA while I was pursuing a double major in graphic design and marketing at Colorado State University. And somebody saw something in me and decided to promote me to be an assistant hall director while I was an undergrad. Um, and all of my peers in the other hall director positions were mostly master's students in the SAHI program at Colorado State at the time. And as I started exchanging and engaging with them, I learned a lot about, what they were studying, and like, wow, this is really interesting. And I remember one particular afternoon, I had been promoted the next year to be a hall director, and I was leading a staff meeting that evening with the 12 RAs that were on my staff. And I was at my internship as a graphic designer. I was serving in an internship at a local firm designing Yellow Pages ads, which makes me sound super old. But I was sitting there in a cubicle working on a design for some ad, and I was like, this is so boring. I'm so much more excited about the hall staff meeting I'm leading this afternoon. And I ended up actually walking out of my internship that day and never going back. And that was in the fall of my senior year, and I still had about a month, I think, before grad applications were due. So I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply for the SAHI program. I didn't apply to any other program. I just went straight through into the master's program at Colorado State, and kind of never looked back. I still use graphic design and marketing every single day in my job. It's like I consider it an other duties as assigned, or the added benefit of hiring Heather Shea. You get a graphic designer for free. So
That's great. Never know where those other skills definitely come in helpful and handy. I saw a few heads nodding about how folks got their start as being an RA. And I saw a hand raise, and Joe, I saw a head nod.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just share quickly that I was also an RA when I discovered the field, and I remember distinctly because way back in the 90s, I'll just say that, when I was an RA, my undergrad was at Stonehill College, which is a small Catholic college here in the Northeast. And my second year as an RA, I got a call from our then director of residence life, John King, who said, hey, just want to let you know that we've over-enrolled your floor this year, and they're not men, it's women, because there's more women in this incoming class. Do you want to be an RA for a women's floor? And of course, at the time, I'm like, yeah, that sounds like fun, or sounds like something interesting. And I didn't know it at the time, but because of the way the floor was set up, I had my own bathroom. And so it was one of those things at a Catholic college I never thought I would see, but I did. And I think I was one of the first men to have that opportunity. But in that year, working with that staff and working with the RD at that time, I remember thinking, man, I love this work. I love working with students, and I want to continue this path. And I was on the pathway to a marketing management business degree. That's where I was heading. And in my internships and opportunities like Heather, I just didn't like I didn't end up liking the work, the environment. And so when I learned that student affairs was an option and for graduate work was an option, I pursued it. And here we are today.
Great.
And I'll chime in real quick, I guess, just to echo what most have already said. I too was an RA among many other involvements, like most of the panel here. I was an elementary ed major, so I was actually going to school to be a middle school teacher, and I did. I graduated with a degree in elementary education. I student taught seventh graders, which, wow, one of the hardest things ever. But the whole time that was going on, kind of like what Heather said, I think I was wanting to be back in, the college world with doing more things there. And it was during that time I realized, there was a career path. So while I certainly got so much out of my education degree, there were so many parallels with, the K-12 goals and also then with our goals. And I was excited to be able to use many of those transferable skills and ultimately go on to work in higher ed.
Another example of a pathway that kind of took a little divergence after being an RA. Now, Ed, you mentioned that your career pathway took a slightly different path than you initially thought, with business and management as kind of the initial focus. So how has your actual career pathway continued to be maybe different than what you thought?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. When I reflect back on my career so far, I remember distinctly that I wanted to be a director of something. My mentors at the time when I was a student were directors. They were assistant directors, directors, and I thought I could do that job. I could totally do that. I just need a pathway to get there. And I started in residence life. I ended up being in the student union, in student centers, working with student organizations, student government, orientation, Greek life, and I loved it. I loved the interaction, loved the engagement. I loved the opportunity to use what I was learning in business with students and with my staff and the folks I was working with. And if you're drawn to leadership anyway, like if that's something that you aspire to or are because you find yourself being a leader, or you've discovered that you are a leader and you're like, oh, I didn't realize I could do this. All right, let's see what else. When I got to the director level, I thought, I don't know if this is all I want, and I want to continue growing and learning. And so it wasn't until probably midway through my directorship at Bridgewater State, my former institution, that I thought, maybe I do want to be an AVP. Maybe I do want to go into the executive or senior level to help more with policy development, more with, working with cross-campus collaborations on high-level pieces that would impact students in a different way. The minus the one-on-one, you impact students' lives at those levels doing that type of work. And so there were times along that pathway where I thought, to get to the vice presidency or even a dean level or an AVP, there's a lot you have to do. There's a lot you have to learn, and sometimes opportunity dictates what you're able to do. And for some, that's serendipity. For others, it's network. But because there was no clear pathway, there were times where I also thought about leaving the field of student affairs, where my background in technology and marketing and business was pulling me towards other things and other interests connected to higher ed, tangential to higher ed. So I think it's normal for folks to feel that I don't have a clear pathway, or I'm not really sure. I know what I'm interested in. I know the types of things I like to do and the things that challenge me. And you don't need to feel like you have to have a clear pathway. Many of the folks on this panel and others throughout the field have great stories, unique stories that share how they got to where they are. So that's my pathway, and I'm grateful for it because I'm a better professional now for it. I think at times we go through some of the hard times and go, all right, why am I doing this to myself? This is ridiculous. But it's those hard times that actually help you be better for your staff and for your students once you get to whatever your current destination is or your future destinations will be.
Definitely. Those pathways of the unknown, or I think I know what I want, and then you get there and maybe it's actually something a little bit different. I was chuckling when you said you knew you wanted to be a director, because I know we have a few other directors on our panel today. Now, for our other directors, is that something you knew you wanted one day? And was it in the area that you're presently directing? And how did you kind of end up to the path where you are presently?
I thought I wanted to be the traditional director of residence life. When I went on to be a hall director, then I remember we had to put a bio on the webpage at the first institution I was at. One of them was future goals, and I had no idea at the time. I was like, okay, I want to be a director of housing later on, because I thought that's just what you do. And I didn't realize all the doors that could open for me in the meantime. And so I never thought I would go on to be a director of a student leadership and involvement office, and then also now financial aid, which I'll talk about more later. I never thought I would have that opportunity, but yeah.
I'm actually returning to a second directorship in the exact same functional area on the other side of my PhD. So it's the first time in my career that I have returned back to a job, which I think kind of leads us into our next question, which is a fascinating experience. But directing a women's center in another university, working on my doctorate, and then directing a women's student services office here has given me some interesting experiences around context and how the state and the institution really matter in terms of what you're able to accomplish. And also, I would say that it's been fascinating to kind of revisit some of the things that I learned, since I had never kind of returned back to the same functional area before. I've kind of been a rookie in every role that I've had. And so, I don't know, those are some of the things I think would different than I expected. I think I would have thought I would be taking one step and then moving up, but instead I did the zigzag around and across the country.
Yeah, sometimes there's U-turns along the way in the path too. For our other panelists, were there other roles, committees, tasks, things that surprised you about the job roles that you had? Joe, I know you mentioned having some thoughts and reflections on your Director of Student Financial Services role.
Yeah, I mean, when I was approached to apply for this position in financial aid, basically, I said no at first because I felt that I was not equipped. I had no experience in financial aid really, other than having reviewed some basic things when I worked in housing for contract release pieces and relating to financial need and special circumstances. But the truth is that, you know, we're still all here for the same purpose, right? We're here to help support our students. And I had the foundation for it, and I'm so glad I jumped in and went through with the process, because I found it to be the most rewarding job I've had so far. And I'll talk more about how I get to remove barriers in one of the future questions. But I guess that's a big piece of advice. You know, when you get that opportunity, even if it's something you think you're not equipped for or that you're not familiar with, it could be life changing. You know, and for me, it was definitely a big change in my career trajectory. But I'm so appreciative and thankful for that.
Yeah, you never know where those opportunities are going to come up, and just taking the opportunity even just to learn more and see if it is, you know, a pathway that you want to pursue, and kind of consider that. I do want to take a moment just to remind those that are tuning in and joining us virtually. Thank you again for joining us for our Careers in Student Affairs Month with our 4 panelists. Again, you're welcome to chat in comments, questions that you might have for our panelists now that you know a little bit about their pathways kind of to student affairs. And then before we jump to our next question, now, Ceceilia, you're in a role where you kind of have this dual role and dual environments that you're operating in. Could you share a little bit more about that?
I do, and absolutely. So Joe mentioned a really good point that resonates with me, which is you never really know where those skills that you're developing might end up serving you in another position. So when I pursued my PhD, I did hope to find a faculty position, but in doing so, I was thinking about kind of that traditional academic trajectory. And while I studied student affairs, I didn't know how I would have it integrate from a practitioner perspective necessarily. And then here comes this amazing opportunity to serve as a faculty in residence. And here at St. John's, what that means is we're really able to bring together the academic and co-curricular. You know, I'll bring in speakers, we'll have traditional events, I'll invite students over for dinner, we'll do cultural events, and all of those things that were so important to me in my work serving students directly, I get to do in my current role. And, you know, my experience in student affairs really served me well in interviewing for such a position, because I could really speak to the role, having done a lot of program planning and event management in former roles. It's very interesting because I was sharing this, and the ACPA has helped out a lot. I'm active in the Commission for Academic Affairs, and what I love about the Commission is it kind of brings together the student affairs piece and those of us who are not necessarily on that side of the house, so that we're, one, staying informed, but two, just making that connection. Sometimes it seems like we can be worlds apart, but I've been able to just receive a lot of mentorship and support through that commission. And if you ever have a chance and you find that professional home, continue to build those resources and seek out mentorship within there, because it doesn't matter what the next position is. You never know where you can take those bits of experience and advice and use them as you move on in your career.
That's great. I know that a lot of our folks that are on the call today have affiliation with ACPA, and our panelists here. And Heather, you were just saying how you kind of found your home within ACPA and found those professional connections as you were moving into a new kind of functional area for you back when.
Yeah. Yeah, I was mentioning as we were talking before the call that my whole undergrad and grad school, I lived on campus in the residence halls at Colorado State for a variety of reasons. I was working there and employed, and then had a graduate assistantship. So when my second job out of my master's program was as the director of commuter student affairs, and I had zero knowledge of what it was to be a commuter student. I was really not qualified for that job at all. But I, jumped in, and my mentor, supervisor, had suggested actually that I attend ACPA that year because there was a commission for commuter students and adult learners, and that I put my name in to join the directorate. And I'm like, why would they ask me to be a part of the leadership of this commission? I don't even know. I'm going to them for help. Like, I'm not necessarily going to be contributing much. And I ended up actually finding a pretty phenomenal first involvement experience in the association through that commission, and met some of my lifelong friends, learned a lot about how to better serve the commuter students on my campus because of the connections. And I think the one way that the professional association has really benefited me is in the roles where I've been the only or one of few on my campus. It's given me a network of people across the profession who are serving in similar roles on other campuses to kind of bring those ideas back. And every year there would be a session at ACPA called More Than a Place to Park about serving commuter students, and those ideas were just invaluable to the work that I was doing. And then through that, I think I've continually gotten involved. And my master's advisor was a past president of ACPA, and he has been instrumental as a mentor in connecting me to various pieces of the field. Nominated me for Diamond Honoree, which was very, I'm humbly grateful for that opportunity as well. And I really enjoyed being involved in the association. I'm glad to be able to be back in a role. I had to take a little bit of time away while I was working on my PhD and finishing up my dissertation, but I'm glad to be back.
Awesome. And Joe, I know you've had certainly ACPA involvement, but you also mentioned that you have the opportunity to remove barriers in your current role. And so what are some of the ways that you feel that you're able to advocate and work in community to create a more socially just world and education environment within your role?
So oftentimes financial aid isn't technically considered under student affairs. At my institution, it has been and it's not, but either way, that doesn't matter because we still work very closely with, all the folks in student services, faculty members as well, for the good of the students. And what I found that I enjoy the most about financial aid is that on a daily basis, I get to remove barriers for students. Now, we know higher education was not originally built for everyone, right? And that's problematic. And we also know that cost is a major factor that can really hurt a lot of our students who come from different socioeconomic statuses. And so, no, we can't always just, throw money at people in financial aid, but what we can do is we can really try to help remove the barriers by helping folks understand the process. Because if you're a first-gen college student, or if you're not getting support from, mentors or other, adults, if you will, this process can be hard to navigate. And for many students, it can prevent them from enrolling or staying in college. And so it's a great joy to me that I get to work with so many partners in my team, that we get to work one-on-one with students to help them navigate these, often confusing processes in order for them to be successful. So I found a lot of enjoyment in that and found it to be very rewarding.
I think that's a really helpful perspective. Sometimes I think it can be easy to pin certain roles as the student service role or not the student service role, or the role that is really social justice, equity, inclusion focused. And it shouldn't be that way. It should weave in and out of each of our roles and the work that we do. Do any of our other panelists have thoughts on the ways that you're able to really do that within your role and advocate for that, for community and for equity?
I'm a student success researcher, so I feel like my heart and my head lies with those students who don't see themselves represented, or if they see themselves represented, it's in a way that's inauthentic or isn't in alignment with who they are. And having the opportunity to advocate for them both from a research perspective and a very active support perspective is, I'm really fortunate to do the work. And I feel like we all learn, more from them often than we are even putting out there. But I see myself as an advocate in that I've gone through this process and I've been able to navigate the system. And now I have an opportunity to understand what those roadblocks are and hopefully challenge others so that we can eliminate those roadblocks.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective and that reminder of the many ways too the advocacy takes place, the direct advocacy, the research advocacy, which can also certainly be direct, as well as the direct service to students, and also that existing as resistance in your pathway to and through as proof and as mentorship. So that's really great. Thank you. So knowing each of you, I know that you hold terminal degrees. Can you share a little bit with us about your pathway for choosing your master's program, and then also kind of at the doctoral level, how, when, and why did you decide it was time to get a terminal degree, and what was that path like?
I guess I'll start. I earned my master's from Central Connecticut State University in educational leadership, and interestingly, my doctorate is in education and educational leadership from Johnson & Wales University. And there was about a 13-year gap from my master's to my doctoral program beginning. And I think I chose doing the doctoral program because early in my career, a mentor said to me, if and when you're ready to do a doctoral program, do it because the next job really requires it, because it is a lot of work. And depending on your family life, depending on your personal, it does interrupt the flow of that lifestyle. And so understanding that is a commitment to do a doc program and really understanding why you want to do it, as opposed to just doing it because you feel like you have to or because others are doing it. I chose an EDD program versus a PhD program because for me, it was a program that aligned with what I wanted to do at that time, which was go for senior and executive leadership positions. And because I wasn't probably going to work at a tier 1 research institution based on my pathway, I was okay getting an EDD. I went back and forth on that for quite a bit of time and talked to many people as to the benefits and the differences between the EDD and PhD. And so for me, the EDD was the right degree for me. The format was both in person and online. So it allowed for a hybrid model on the weekends for working professionals, which I really appreciated. And so I would just, encourage folks interested in the doctorate to really ask good questions about why you want to get into it, the program of study, and the type of degree you want to get, because there's so many different ways to earn a doctorate now. But I'll tell you, with the doctorate transformed my thinking. The doctorate took my experience that I had built to that point and gave it to me in a different light. Like I understood things a lot differently because of the deep thinking, research, and writing that you do during a doc program. So I would encourage folks to just consider that when they're looking at theirs.
Joe, you have a EDD as well. Do you have reflections on that decision or your decision of pursuing a master's?
For the EDD piece, honestly, I echo what Ed said for many of the same reasons. My goals and vision was kind of the same as Ed's, and in terms of timing, it just seemed right, and it was hard, but also I kind of enjoyed being, I don't want to say forced, but when I was in the program, despite the time commitments, I enjoyed having a reason to read and learn and be challenged again. Just because that's what you do, you carve out time for that, and it was greatly enjoyable. As for the master's program, like many of us, because I was an RA, I went on to be a hall director, and I chose that school. I chose South Dakota State University, where I was working full time, and I also did my master's there. And I, like many of us, and like Cecilia probably is to so many students now, as you know, an instructor, as a professor. I found a mentor like that in Dr. Ruth Harper at South Dakota State. She was my mentor. She coordinated the student affairs program there, and she's now retired. But I gained so much from her. And yeah, I echo what Ed said though about the EDD degree.
And Heather, you recently completed your PhD. Congratulations to you this summer. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I, similarly to the other folks, wholeheartedly agree that you have to do it for the right reasons, that it's not just to put the letters behind your name, because it is a lot of work. As I kind of mentioned, I pursued my master's at the institution where I had done my undergrad, and then worked in 5 different campuses over the course of the next 15 years before returning. Part of that was life circumstance and where I was living and not having a program nearby, but when I was ready, I was really ready, and I specifically looked for a program with a specific faculty member who I really wanted to work with, and that was a person who I had connected with through ACPA and who had been a mentor for me for a long time. And so I came to Michigan State University specifically to work with her, and was fortunate to get a job and, you know, all the other life stuff that goes along with moving your family across the country. But I was really grateful for that opportunity, and yeah, finished in May. So it still feels very new. And I'm now in an office that degree really matters in terms of credibility and in terms of how students see you. And I definitely recognize the benefit of that. And I, as Ed and Joe said, I think I do see the work really differently through a different lens, having had that opportunity to kind of critically reflect upon the field and also study higher education broadly. My PhD is in higher education, not in student affairs. And so because of that, understanding the structure in which student affairs is embedded has been a really great augment to the master's program, which was just about student affairs for me.
Great. And Cecilia, do you want to tell us a little bit about your pathway 2 and 3 degrees?
So for my master's program, interestingly enough, when I realized that I could get a master's, it was around the same time that recruitment for those programs with assistantships and things were happening. And so it's a very quick story, but it's worth it. So I found out about the Oshkosh Placement Exchange. And for those who have been in Res Life, you know, it's a big opportunity for folks who are looking for grad hall director positions. So I do this search and I start sending out my resume to anybody who's still accepting resumes. Because I just found out that, you know, this is what you do. Now I have to go do this thing. And so I apply, I get some interviews, and I ended up at Loyola Chicago and I loved every minute of it. But I'm from Maryland. I totally just made this move because I figured if we're going to do this, let's do it. Unfortunately, it ended up being a great experience. My PhD was a bit more intentional. I'll echo what my colleagues have said. Life has a lot to do with the decisions that you make, and you should really take the time to invest in yourself in terms of thinking about what you're willing to give up and what you really want to hang on to. And so for me, I was living in Michigan at the time, and for me, there was never a thought that I was going to move. I'm a mom to 3, and I had a little baby when I started. She was 8 weeks when I started my PhD program, and so it was just really important to me that we had the supports that we did, and we were in the environment that we did. And so I made that decision, and it was a wonderful decision. A lot of folks talk about different programs for lots of reasons. But I think just being secure in yourself. We have conversations about going to school, where you work and things like that a lot for master's programs, but we don't talk about it for PhD and EDD programs. And I would just like to say, for those of you who are considering these programs, don't count out, valuing those life needs. If you need more face-to-face time, if you need online, just really think about that, because it is a huge commitment. It's a lot of work, but it's so fulfilling and rewarding. You do want to come out of that with the pieces of you that you've honored intact, because we do give a lot away in that process. And so I would just encourage you to be totally okay with that. And having my daughters see me walk across the stage in 2016 was one of the best moments of my life. And so don't count yourself out also, because you have this idea of where you should go in the United States. There's never a perfect time, but there's always a right time. There's a lot of programs that are accessible to you.
I love that reminder of the different pathways to and through to the degree programs and finding the one that's right for you. Now we have a question. It's actually our last question that was going to close us out. So we have a question from Ray Plaza. What advice do you have to give to new professionals that are questioning their future in the field, or perhaps in general moving forward in their career?
I would say we need you. We need your voices and your perspective, and everything that you needed when you were a student and that you give to students. And please value that and bring it to the table with all the skills that you learn from mentors, from academic programs. But we need you, authentically, because it helps make all of us better.
I would say for as you're looking at where your next move is going to be, whether that be in a master's or doctoral program or just working full time, think about the community and the institution that is best for you. Does it align with your values? Do you feel comfortable there? That's going to be home for you. And I think that the sense of community for me is very important. And so, for instance, I found that in general, I like smaller towns a little bit more. I like, mid-sized institutions maybe more than the large institutions, compared to, Heather's over at Michigan State there, huge institution, and, she's rocking it there. But I think you've got to feel good about where you're physically at. And I think whether you're, an individual moving on your own, or like Ceceilia said, she has kids, I think that's probably an important piece of, where you call home. And that piece of community is very important.
Yeah, I will add that. I think for me, on your home campus as well as within the profession, as my career has moved me around the country, me and my family around the country, maintaining those connections with people from other campuses has been really critical. And then once you arrive, you can build those networks of support, and sometimes they're in unlikely places. And so I think the best advice I have for folks is to recognize that you need trusted allies and people who will be your sounding boards, your place to go vent, or your place to just ask the question, am I thinking about this, the right way or a different way, or, should I be thinking about it a different way altogether? I've really benefited from those supports, and sometimes they happen at my campus, and sometimes they are people who I've connected with over the course of my career. So.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what everyone has said. I would only offer, I guess this may be oversimplifying things, but I want to encourage folks to embrace the dissonance that comes with the learning that happens as you grow through various stages of the profession. I've had a lot of folks who have this natural tension that exists when they're struggling, that it's like, well, I don't know, is it the field? Is it me? Is it my supervisor? There's a whole, you go through these processes. And I think sometimes we forget that growth happens through that tension, that when we do a lot of that through those processes. And so embrace the opportunities that are given, make opportunity for yourself if you feel that you don't have them. get involved local, on your campus, get involved in association work if you can, based on your circumstance. I know it's hard for some folks to do so. And then I would also just quickly add that the community colleges need your leadership. And so as someone who's just entered the community college, I think where the role of community college will play as the academy continues to evolve over the next 10 to 15 years, community colleges need strong student affairs professionals as practitioners and as leaders and as both as we continue to evolve. So that's my absolute shameless plug for community colleges.
Great, thank you. And I really appreciate that parting advice and also that reminder of absolutely we need you and we appreciate you here in the field of student affairs and higher education. And celebrating Careers in Student Affairs Month isn't just about celebrating and supporting a particular career pathway, but it's really about celebrating you and celebrating our professionals that are tuning in with us here today, our future professionals, folks that are pondering this pathway, so thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to our panelists for sharing your path to and through. And for those of you that are joining us today or reviewing the live stream at a later time, we'll hope you'll continue connecting with ACPA's career resources, including our ACPA Career Central online job portal. And please join us in Nashville, ACPA 20, to continue various conversations related to careers and student affairs. And our Career Wellness Center will be available again this year at ACPA 20 with educational sessions and programming to support your career development. So thank you and have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Angela. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.